On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, promoting your business.
Welcome to the Crushing Debt Podcast with your host, Florida attorney Sean Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law, and I've got a guest on this week's episode. But before we get to my guest, I have a couple of things that I wanted to talk to you about. So first off, I do want to promote our sponsor, Sam Cohen. So for those of you that are longtime listeners, you know that Sam provides errors and omissions insurance, malpractice coverage to attorneys and title companies all over the country. Now, right now, he's focusing on Texas and Florida specifically, but he can pretty much write malpractice coverage for attorneys and title companies anywhere in the country. So if you are an attorney or title company and you're looking for a competitive quote, or if you know an attorney or title company that you want to refer, that would really help support the show. You can contact Sam at Attorneys First Insurance. Sam at attorneysfirst.com is his email address. You can visit his website, which is attorneysfirst.com. That would be a great way to support me, to support the show, and to support Sam, and to thank him for his sponsorship of the Crushing Debt Podcast. So thank you for that. The other thing that I wanted to let you know is that I may be doing some tweaks to the show. So I'll be explaining those here as we go. Expect those to start to roll out probably in the next month and a half or so, 2 months, give or take. They're not going to be wholesale changes. I'm not going to make huge changes to the show, but I'm going to make some small tweaks here and there. Some of them I'm going to describe in advance, and some of them I'm going to let you find. So at the same time, I am open to any of your suggestions. A lot of the changes that I do make to the show come from listener suggestions. So if you have any suggestions about what I can do to make the show better for you, please let me know. Reach out to me, Sean at yesnerlaw.com, or leave a comment, or reach out to me on social media. But this week's guest I'm really excited about. So I met him through the Palm Harbor Chamber of Commerce. And so get out there, do your networking, because you never know what organizations you may visit that are going to end up providing you with some great connections. My guest this week is Donnie Hathaway. Now, he's a realtor with Berkshire Hathaway here in the local Clearwater area, although I know he covers all of Tampa Bay. He is a Florida native like me. Born and raised here in Pinellas County, which, for those of you that don't know, that's Clearwater, St. Pete, Dunedin, Palm Harbor. Those are a lot of the major cities. Seminole, Largo, all of those cities here are in Pinellas County. But he was born and raised here, a local Floridian like me. He began his real estate career in 2016. Now, Donnie, even though shares his last name, Donnie Hathaway, with Berkshire Hathaway, I did ask him outside of the interview, and there is no relation there. So he earned that job at Berkshire Hathaway on his own merits. He's a fantastic young realtor in the area. One of the things that impressed me a lot about Donnie is he also started a podcast called Palm Harbor Local, and you can find that podcast at palmharborlocal.com. Now, interestingly, that podcast sometimes touches on real estate, but really what the focus of the podcast is to help small business owners get the love they deserve and expose his audience and you all to those local business owners that he interviews. Now, most of the business owners that he interviews are local to the Palm Harbor area, which is sort of central north Pinellas County. There are some that are, in and around that area. I was a guest on Donnie's show as well, and my office is more in Clearwater. But the majority of the people that he interviews are in and around the Palm Harbor area, and there are all kinds of different people that he interviews. The show is not necessarily real estate related. He started the podcast here in January of 2021, so he's got 6-7 months of episodes banked as we do this interview here. You can find Donnie on Instagram at Palm Harbor Local. You can also find him individually, Donnie.Hathaway on Instagram. You can also visit the Palm Harbor Local website, which is palmharborlocal.com. And that's where you can find the podcast as well as on all the major podcast players. Had a great time interviewing Donnie. We did pre-record the episode, so I'm going to sort of sign off now. You'll hear, probably will be a very easy fade into the interview with Donnie, and I hope you enjoy this week's episode. So welcome to the show, Donnie.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. So I was looking over your bio on the website, which for those of you listening, it's DonnieHathaway.com, DONNIE Hathaway, HATHAWAY.com. So if you want to learn more about Donnie and who he is and what he does, in addition to what we're going to talk about today, head over to his website, DonnieHathaway.com. But I looked on the website and I didn't realize we have something in common in that we're both native Floridians.
Yes.
So you were born and raised in Pinellas County.
Yeah. Born and raised here in Pinellas County. Pinellas Park was like my younger childhood. And then Oldsmar, we moved to Oldsmar, a new neighborhood in there. And that's where I spent most of my childhood, kind of grew up in Oldsmar. And
Nice.
I bounced around after that.
So you said bounce around. Have you always been in Tampa Bay or?
A few years up in Gainesville for school.
Well, we won't talk about that.
I saw you went. Are you just a Florida State grad, or did you go to school there? Or?
I am a grad. I went to undergrad at FSU.
Okay.
I went to law school up in Alabama.
Okay.
And that was really the only 3 years I've lived outside the state of Florida was
Okay.
when I was in Alabama. So yeah, that's sort of where I'm curious. Are you the same as me in that you've been in Florida your entire life, or have you bounced around to other states?
No, so yeah, in Florida my entire life.
Wow.
So Gainesville for a few years, and then back to this area, and then Palm Harbor for most of that after that.
Nice. Well, I was actually born in Tampa, but
Okay.
I grew up in Miami. We moved to Miami before I was 1 or 2. You know, I think it's a healthy respect for the Gators. The Hurricanes I can't stand.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in Miami. So we can talk about that later. I'm sure we can swap game stories.
Oh, for sure.
And whatnot. So
For sure.
you began your real estate career in 2016.
Correct. Yep.
So how did you decide to get into real estate?
Yeah. So that's an interesting story. I have a degree in biology, and with that degree, I was planning on going down the kind of medical career path, either being a physician's assistant or physical therapist. I grew up playing sports, so I kind of had an interest in working with athletes kind of in that career field. So I got my degree and started a master's program. And at that point, I kind of realized like I was done with school. Like school just, I had my degree. It wasn't easy for me to get my degree. I really struggled like figuring out what I wanted to do with my career. So, I decided at that point, like, okay, I'm done. I just need to figure out what I want to do from here. So I kind of took a year, just took a little, side job here locally while I could kind of figure out like what kind of career path I wanted to do. So during that year, I spent a lot of time like listening to different podcasts. The Bigger Pockets podcast was a big one that I spent a lot of time listening to, all about investing in real estate, the different types of real estate you can kind of get into. So that was my original plan, was to be an investor. I wanted to get my real estate license, kind of learn the business, learn how to sell real estate, learn that for a little while, for a couple of years, and then start investing into real estate. But I really loved the sales side of it, the residential sales side of real estate, kind of meeting people, helping them through that process of buying their home.
And we're going to talk about your podcast, which is Palm Harbor Local. And I know you live now in Palm Harbor.
Correct.
And I know that pretty much any realtor in Tampa Bay is going to say, we'll take a listing wherever. But is there something that drove you to Palm Harbor? Is there something you particularly enjoy about Palm Harbor?
Yeah, I think it kind of just happened by chance and circumstances. I think like a lot of people in this area, everyone's kind of really attracted to Dunedin. That's kind of like the hot spot, like, in the Pinellas County, North Pinellas County area. And we were looking for a home in Dunedin as well. Dunedin and Palm Harbor. We had we wanted to be closer to the downtown, closer to the beaches, and we wanted to be close to the Pinellas Trail as well. So that was some of our criteria. So we ended up finding a home in Palm Harbor and just kind of fell in love with that area, Palm Harbor. It's a little more slower pace, I think, than Dunedin. They're both kind of small towns, but it just kind of fits our lifestyle and stuff better than kind of any of the other areas, and we just kind of fell in love with it.
Yeah, when I first moved here, I lived in a neighborhood called Greenbrier.
Oh yeah,
which is still Clearwater.
Correct. Yeah.
But it's pretty much spitting distance from both Palm Harbor and Dunedin.
Yeah.
And so we used to do both of those all the time. If you're listening and you want to come take a vacation down here in the Clearwater area, definitely have Palm Harbor, definitely have Clearwater and Dunedin on your list of things to do. If you're looking for a house, definitely have Donnie on your list. So what do you enjoy about real estate?
I think it's the people. It's just and that's kind of where the podcast came in. But it's just meeting the people, getting to know them, their stories. Everyone has a different background, different circumstances. So it's just building those relationships, building those connections, and then figuring out like how to navigate that process with them to get them the home that they want, that kind of fits their lifestyle and fits what they're looking for during that time. So every client, every person that you deal with is different, and presents a new challenge, and that's what makes it fun and interesting.
So do you deal mostly with homeowners and families, or real estate investors? Does it matter?
Yeah, most of my business has all been homeowners and families. The investing side of it is, it's like a different ballgame, kind of a different animal to kind of get into. So you got to be committed to that and spend more time, working that side of it, and just kind of learning that aspect of it as well, right? Right.
So we're here middle July as we record, and probably as we release, July of 2021. Hopefully coming out of the backside of COVID. What do you think is going to happen in the real estate market? I know it's been a crazy market. I've called it the Wild Wild West, in terms of you list a property at noon and you've got 1,000 offers by quarter after.
Yeah,
that's slowed down a little bit. But where do you see the market going? What do you see it doing from here?
That's tough. I mean, I think with inventory, the reason that homes are selling so quickly, right, is because inventory's low, supply and demand, right? There's a huge amount of buyer demand. People, I think because of COVID, a lot of people have moved from out of state, moving to Florida, more so than normal. Obviously, Florida is kind of a melting pot for a lot of people, retiring or just transitioning their careers. I think as kind of we get past COVID and families are a little bit more comfortable, selling their home or figuring out what that next step is, I think inventory will increase, and that'll kind of help with that demand and help with that situation of 10, 15 offers when you list a home. So hopefully we see that inventory rise. I think prices are still going to increase, but just not as much as they have the last couple of years.
Yeah, I don't know that we're going to see the same bubble that we saw in 2007, 8 through whatever, 12, 13, 14. It does concern me a little bit that prices are going up as quickly as they are.
Yeah.
That contributed, I think, to what we had earlier. But it's interesting to see, and like I said, the amount of offers, typically it would be where you'd list a property and you'd get a whole bunch of offers right away. I think, and you can correct me, you're still getting offers. It's just not as crazy, it's not as voluminous as it's been previously.
Yeah, 100%. I think we're still getting, the majority of properties are still getting multiple offers. The offers they're not going as high, or they're not willing to, eliminate all the contingencies like they were before,
I had some crazy where they all cash, eliminated inspection contingencies, eliminated. So it was an as-is with no inspection, 0-day inspection.
Yeah,
and
no appraisals too. Like they're waiving the appraisal contingency.
Right. Have you what's your kind of craziest story?
Yeah, I had one recently where it was one of those situations where we had I think we ended up with 21 offers. We knew we were going to have, a lot of offers on the property. He had recently purchased the property, done some updates to it, and just did a really good job with the updates, quality work, and did the right updates, kind of what the buyer demand is looking for. So we ended up getting, 21 offers over the weekend. We listed it on a Friday. I think Chose ended up, getting all the offers in on a Sunday, 21 offers total. And we had offers, $40,000, $50,000. I think it was, I think we were $40,000 over asking price.
Wow. And,
so a little bit of mix of everything when you have that many offers. You have some cash offers, and then, you have ones that are, so that exact scenario, there's no inspection, they're waiving the appraisal. So, and this is like, they're financing the property too. So they've got to come up with a difference, whatever that appraisal, gap is.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. Like, even as a buyer myself, I don't think I would do that in some of those situations.
No, I had one where it was a $700,000 purchase price. It was a $100,000 deposit due within 3 days of signing the contract, as is, no inspection contingency, no financing contingency because it was an all-cash deal. And I remember the guy called me and said, I've got cold feet. I want out. Like, I'm sorry. And he said, well, I haven't paid the $100,000, or no, he had already paid the $100,000. He said, so what are my chances of getting the $100,000 back? I said, I don't know. It's as is with 0-day inspection. So
yeah,
you can't even use the as is clause to get out of it. And I'll never forget, he said, well, if I have to buy the house, I'll just buy the house.
Yeah.
This is an all cash deal. $700,000. Something like that. I want to be there one day where I'm like, if I have to drop $700,000, I'll just drop $700,000.
Yeah.
I really want to be there one day. We'll see. I'm not there yet. I'm not anywhere close yet. But any other trends that what's the do you happen to know the market cycle? In other words, on average, how much inventory do we have now? Isn't it something like less than a month?
Yeah, I think we're still less than a month right now, which just like blows my mind. It's just kind of crazy, But I read an article recently too where it's it's not so much that we're not like listing more homes aren't becoming available for sale. It's just that the buyer demand right now is so strong that when they are becoming available, they're being purchased right away. So we're still selling, similar amount of homes that we were, last year, a couple of years before, but just that buyer demand is so strong. And maybe that's because of, low interest rates. People have equity in their home, so they have some cash and to make some decisions.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that happened back at the beginning of the meltdown was somebody would go into foreclosure, but they immediately be able to sell or reinstate because they had so much equity in their house. I don't think there's going to be, and I've done a ton of short sales with Berkshire, Hathaway, Prudential Tropical. I don't think there's going to be as many short sales, but I think we're going to get a flood of sales, forced sales. In other words, go into foreclosure or maybe or cash in your equity and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
I think we're going to get into that, but who knows?
Yeah, right. This is all new to anybody and everybody in this business. Right?
I was talking to somebody yesterday that said, gosh, I happened to, you came in right after that foreclosure meltdown. I was involved right in the middle of it. And to be involved in two just unique real estate markets. I mean, typically people come in and they're not involved in one in their entire career.
Right.
And now here, we're involved in another one. This is my second one. It just sort of made me sit back and think, I might have been doing this for too long. Who knows?
Yeah.
So,
or you're doing something right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Hopefully. So I did want to talk about your podcast, Palm Harbor Local. So as we record, it's a new podcast, and sort of, I've violated my own rule now. Typically, what I'd say to a newer podcaster is that you want to keep everything evergreen. You don't want to tie anything to a certain period of time, but I do want the listener that maybe listens to this show next year to not think it's a new show next year.
Right.
So
when we're talking market and all that kind of stuff.
right.
Yeah.
So you started the show January of 2021. So
Yeah.
sort of what was first tell us what the show is about, and then, how did you start it? Why did you start it? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So Palm Harbor Local, we interview local business owners in and around the Palm Harbor area. So it's not just focused in Palm Harbor, but that's kind of my background, so that's where the name came from, Palm Harbor Local. But we really want to highlight the local business community, the small business owners, kind of help them share their story. And just get to know them, right? Just like I was mentioning before about, getting to know the customers who are buying and selling real estate. The same thing, I enjoy getting to meet the local business owners. My wife and I have always been big supporters of the small business community and kind of restaurants, that local scene. So that's kind of where it came from, that interest came from. We started it in so January of this year, so January of 2021, I had a mentor coach who has been pushing me to do the podcast. And, I had a post on Instagram the other day where I was, I never pictured myself being a podcast host or saying that, I host a podcast. So I had a, obstacle to overcome that thought of being a podcast host, but I started it. Started recording it. The idea with the local businesses was there, right? So there was just, how do I reach out to them? How do I get connected with them? How do I convince them to be on a podcast that, doesn't have any previous history or anything like that?
Right.
So, and then I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with meeting the guests, getting to know them, getting to kind of share their story. It's built some great connections. I think what I love about it too is hearing the stories of listeners of the podcast who, go and use one of these businesses just because they heard it on the podcast, or that's how they got introduced to local business. So I think that's a cool part of what we do.
So how often does the show come out?
Yeah, so we drop an episode once a week. So every Monday morning, a new episode comes out.
Okay. So one question that I get a lot, so I'm curious to hear your answer. Why Monday morning?
Good question. I think I just picked Monday. It's the start of the week, and I wanted to be first thing in the morning, so as people wake up, they have something to listen to.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there's any science or magic to
Right.
it. I mean, this show releases on Thursdays.
Okay.
And for those of you listening, it used to release on Wednesdays.
Okay.
And a couple of weeks in a row, I just couldn't get it up and running by Wednesday, but it was easy to get it up and running by Thursday, and so that's why it's on Thursday now.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't do Wednesday, but I could do Thursday.
Right.
So it's interesting to hear how and why people pick, I do it weekly for this reason, or I release it on this day for this reason. Sometimes it's just personal preference.
Yeah, and it just consistency, right? Just pick a day, stick with it. And then your audience, I think, gets accustomed to okay, it's every Monday this episode comes out.
Right.
I can expect that.
So you're probably, as we record this, about 28, 29, something like that?
Yeah, I think 28's coming out this coming Monday, so I just had 27 released.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any favorites yet?
There's a lot of good ones. I think one of my favorites, and she's kind of become a friend too. We've kind of done some stuff, different giveaways and that sort of stuff together. But she was a local artist that I found on Instagram, and she, like I said, I think she was like either the second or third guest that I had on the podcast. But she draws or paints homes. So she started doing that for my buyers, and as a closing gift, she would paint like the front, the elevation of their home.
Okay.
And then I would put it, frame it and give it to my buyers and stuff. So
like a picture of the home,
Yep.
not she's going and painting the house, a different color or something.
No. Yeah, she paints a picture. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, she paints a picture of the home, and that's what I give to the buyers as a closing gift.
That's cool. And it's personalized.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I know they can find the podcast on your website, again, DonnieHathaway.com. And I know it's on Apple, and I assume it's
on all of them.
Everywhere
Yeah.
else. What was the reason for the podcast? Is it designed to help the real estate business, or is it just a passion project, or a little bit of both?
I think it's turned into a little bit of both. Originally it was designed as a way to kind of get more connected. So a lot of my real estate business has come from, referrals, people that I know, people that are in my circle, my sphere of influence. And so this is just another way to grow that side of the business, to grow the people that I know in the community. And then the local businesses came into it because that's just something I enjoy. Like, I'm always curious, like, who's the owner and kind of what they're about and why they started this business. So that's kind of where that came in. And I've just really fallen in love with being a podcast host and getting to share these stories.
Has it resulted in anything from the business perspective? Has it resulted yet in clients or any of those other benefits or advantages?
Yeah, it hasn't, not directly into the real estate side of the business yet. That's just coming, right? You're building the connections, building the relationships with those people.
Right.
But there's been some other benefits, just becoming more connected within the community, more involved within the community. I think has been a huge part of it.
Yeah, and I think again, I'm a couple hundred episodes ahead of you.
Yeah.
But it took me until I think year 2 or 3. I think year 3 before I got my first sponsor, and then our existing sponsor's been with me now. I think this is his second year with us. But I didn't start acquiring sponsors until I was more than 2 years in. So it's definitely, one of the things that I've heard said a lot is you don't go into podcasting because you want to make money.
Right.
It can happen. And there are some podcasters, independent podcasters out there that are doing this for a living, but it didn't start that way.
Right.
It started as the passion project of,
exactly.
I want to do this or that or the other thing. Sort of as we get to the end here, anything that I didn't cover, anything that you wanted to mention?
No, I think we kind of talked about a lot of the good points and good topics there. We do have a website for the podcast itself too. If you want to just visit palmharborlocal.com. So it's pretty simple, just palmharborlocal.com. And then we're on Instagram as well, so they can kind of follow me on Instagram. It's either at Palm Harbor Local, that's the one for the podcast, or if they want to learn more about some of these businesses, the community, my personal Instagram account is Donnie.Hathaway. So just my first name, last name. And that's kind of where I share the day-to-day stuff, kind of what I do as a real estate, as a podcast host, and just more about the community as well.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate you being a guest on this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me.
And we will talk to you in next week's episode, like I try to successfully say at the end of every episode. We hope that at the end of the month you have more money, rather than at the end of the money you have more month. Thanks again, Donnie. That'll do it for this week's episode, and we'll talk to you in next week's episode of the podcast.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Sean or connect with us on social media. Sean Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.